figuring out what the future holds for you and how you should skill yourself to be ready for what's coming. I'm thrilled to have with us Niyantri Ramakrishnan, who is joining us from Sao Paulo in Brazil. Niyantri has a resplendent career in the pharmaceutical industry. Since February 2012, she has worked across companies like AstraZeneca, Novartis, and then most recently has been at Bayer. She is currently serving as the VP Global Strategy and Portfolio Digital Transformation and IT. She's been in this role since 2023. Experience spans Latin America, Europe, and also some other global centers. She's going to be talking to us about digital transformation and workspaces and how those have evolved. She holds an undergraduate degree from Grinnell College, a BA in economics, and has also got a PLD, a leadership program from the Harvard Business School. In addition to all her amazing achievements from a professional domain, she's also someone I've known for many, many years. I think I've at least known her for all her life. She probably hasn't known me for all of my life. Somebody who is extremely intelligent, extremely warm, compassionate, and always wanting to do business with a purpose. And I think, Niyantri, you really found yourself, and you've been able to make such a deep impact in so many organizations, because I know that purpose is always what has been the pivot of your decision making. So thank you for being here, and thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Vibha. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And the admiration is mutual, first of all. Really, really happy to see you flourish and you grow. And for me, this has been really, really wonderful to watch from close and from a distance at the same time. But it's been really, really wonderful, and I'm really, really honored to be here with you today.
Awesome, terrific. Okay, so Niyantri, let's get sort of started in terms of just warming up. We thought about the book and we said, let's write a book about the future. And then people said, why would you write a book about the future? Everyone says, live in the now, enjoy the moment. But we think it's important to talk about the future. I personally think, keeping our pulse on the future, very important. In my career, in my domain, obviously, as I help students figure out their careers, we're always planning ahead. In your world and in your work, why the future? Why is it important to keep a pulse on it?
I think when we talk about the future, really, it's not really something that is so distant, first of all. We always think of the future as if it's got to be a 10-year time frame or something that we're talking about 20 years ahead. But the future is, the gap between the present and the future seems to be closing more and more as we see, with the advancement of technology, with the access to information, with, you even look at children, how they're growing up today. It just seems every parent I speak to says, I just feel like my child is growing up so fast. It's just this, they're able to be so much more mature than I was. Now, when you think about these things, it really matters, because the type of information and the way in which people are today were not the way that they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. External factors, technology specifically, really starts taking a bigger role in how things can be. So we've got to consider the future, because the future is really being able to tackle with further uncertainties and further challenges in better ways than we can today.
Okay,
and
cool.
those challenges will just increase.
Okay, so you're saying the rate of acceleration of change is much faster than we've seen before. Too many uncertainties, but you want to be planned. You want to have some sort of structured vision for the future. Hence, keeping your pulse on the future. Okay, great. You touched upon the word of the future, technology. You work in that field. You're working in digital transformation. Tell us a little bit about what is digital transformation, and how do you help companies sort of go through this transformation as they plan ahead?
I love this question, because even within companies, people try to decipher this question and answer it. Well, what is digital transformation for us, and what is digital transformation? But at the end, when we talk about digital, we're talking about technology being more accessible to everybody, to have a role in how it's used and how it can be best adopted for various purposes, like efficiency, to enhance quality, to also do things faster and possibly cheaper and possibly better. So all of this coming together, digital transformation is about being able to evolve the way companies work, in involving technology in the process. In other words, previously, let's say maybe even 30 years ago, reps who are, serving doctors in the pharmaceutical industry would go onto the street and actually go into physicians' offices and talk to physicians about different products and services and use, paper charts. And it was a whole lot more manual, we can say, right? But today, when you think about it, that still happens actually. That still happens, but using iPads, using technology, using video, using different types of formats, because the way people process information and the way we can serve people better is by bringing information to life, bringing information in more appealing and more interesting and more engaging ways. So the use of technology in many ways and digital transformation really is about elevating the purpose of the company, first of all, being the real direction, and being able to embed technology in the value chain across the company to better serve customers at the end of the day in the absolute best way possible. But at the same time, it has a huge impact on efficiency and automation. Manual processes take hours, days. It takes tons of people to do it. And can those people actually be freed up to do better work that is a little bit more valuable? So I see efficiency, quality, and speed really as the benefits of employing technology to run digital transformation in companies and be able to innovate really at the end of the day.
Okay. So it sounds like, to sort of summarize, it sounds like boosting productivity using automation, using technology in terms of business processes, and sort of helping people gain more efficiency and speed with processes. Any examples that you can share from whatever's publicly known in public domains in terms of what kind of transformations you have seen and what kind of transformations you are seeing coming?
Yes, absolutely. So even when you talk about document management, something so simple and basic, right? Being able to have everything in one single repository, but now applying even artificial intelligence, there are ways in which you can extract information in a faster way. It's a way in which you can actually make complex technology more accessible to everybody. It's the democratization really of technology. So employing AI for processes that are highly manual can actually benefit, including document management, document registrations, and so forth. It can really, really help. That's one thing. We have use cases towards that. Another thing that we can do to really transform the company is also at Bayer, for example, we have our own version of ChatGPT, which is called My Genesis. And our model is kind of an internal space, a safe space for Bayer documentation information, where people can, in our company, actually use the technology of generative AI really to be able to be more efficient. And people are saving from 20, some people 30% of their time using this. So this is a tangible case where we actually see the uptake of new innovative technologies, and we see productivity gains, and we see this being done in a safe way for our company. So this is also a very, very good example of digital transformation of last year to this year, for example.
Okay. And in terms of business processes that you see getting digitized more and more in the coming years, are there certain processes you see getting automated to the extent that the human element, the human quotient, will get completely negated? Are there certain jobs that you see that will just sort of get completely disrupted out of existence?
So this is a very, very big debate that's happening currently also, because people actually don't know the limits and necessarily also the farthest potential of artificial intelligence. We don't know it. Nobody knows it, and even governments are trying to figure it out. The US is figuring it out right now. The EU just had a rather hasty decision also on creating a different AI regulation within the European Union recently. Now, why is that? Because we're trying to figure out what the implications will be, including what it will be on people. Yeah. So there are various, specifically to your question on whether this can replace people's roles. Some jobs might completely take a different shape. So jobs that, that have to do with translations, for example, maybe it won't all go away because there's still a human element to it, which in many circumstances cannot be fully replicated by AI, right? And please note, AI is not an absolute. It has, there are two poles to it. There's one which is extreme productivity, extreme intelligence, rapid, abilities to suggest information that can then be used, and expediting processes. And then there's the other side of it, which is disinformation. And disinformation at its worst case is actually an infringement upon people's human rights, and also on maybe even is destabilizing democracy, yeah, at its worst extreme. So when you think about the role of AI and whether it can substitute what a person can do, some roles will naturally have an impact, but I don't necessarily see any role completely being eliminated 100%, because what it might do is free up time for people to be more productive, and different skill sets. I think that it's really that it's not about roles really, Vibha, it's more about skill sets, because the types of skills that people have today, specifically if it is to make something that's manual digital, that type of job will really be more at risk, I believe. What will be possible is, that's why it's important to enhance skill sets even of people in our company, where we really focus on how they can be best used for a new world, where they can leverage that a benefit of AI.
Okay.
And
so
and
you're
change
saying
the
it
way
as a
in which they
productivity booster, enhancer. You're not looking at it as something that's going to come in and just swipe away jobs. You don't think that's going to happen?
No, I don't believe that. I believe that we're farther away from actual replacement of human roles with AI technology. I believe that it will enhance the way people operate.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Since you're based out of Brazil, since you have done a lot of work with Latin America and teams based out of there, give us a little sense on what is happening in terms of the technology curve in these economies. What is the AI uptake? What is the digital transformation uptake? What is the regulatory environment? What is going on in that part of the world? I really want a little bit of a perspective from that region in the book. So if you could share a little bit, give us a glimpse into as a spokesperson from that economy, what is going on there? What's happening in the region?
Yes, in the region of Latin America overall, I can say Latin America is one of the regions where, and I'll even give you an example of Brazil, or you even take Mexico, where there are actually more smartphones than people.
More smartphones than people. Wow.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, why is that? If you think about it, it's because you actually have a natural proclivity towards technology. People actually value the ability to connect. I think it was in 2020 that there was a study, or there was I think it's by Visual Capitalist, I believe, a study done on what people value the most. Yeah. And people value, family, community, belonging, sense of belonging, personal growth and development. Now, technology, especially in the Latin American region where community was really high, is a way in which people in a very large country like Brazil, for example, people are spread out, not able to sometimes be with their families. People value the ability to be able to connect. Now, this is true for many countries in many regions across the world. But in Brazil, you'll see people use WhatsApp like people use, to the frequency that people use WeChat in China, I would say. People really, really feel that this is one of the most essential needs today. And it has nothing to do with age here. You'll find people in, there's a study on this, but people between the ages of 45 and 65 are some of our biggest users of digital technologies. So the countries and the region itself is very much rife with technological adoption in general. Artificial intelligence is a good experimenting ground. For many multinationals specifically, this region is a region that is not too big. So, the concept of too big to fail or experimenting where it might be too big, that doesn't hold true so much for Latin America. but it's also not too small that the results would be irrelevant or kind of questioned to a large degree. So it's actually a great grounds for innovating and testing. And that's what
are you seeing
doing.
innovation coming out of Latin America?
Oh, yes.
Or are they
yes.
largely dependent on large North American companies, like most of the world is, to be the crucibles of innovation, and then those products are further adapted towards usage in Latin America?
No, you'll actually find that there are companies that, although they have a huge Latin American presence, like Mercado Libre, for example, is giving Amazon. I mean, Amazon is competing with Mercado Libre. It's not the other way around at the moment. You'll see how it's a marketplace just like Amazon, where you can buy almost anything. But it's a company that originated in Argentina, and it's taken over all of Latin America, and it definitely has a stronger positioning than an American company would already as an incumbent in this country. Okay. So, or this country or this region. You have other examples. You have banks like Nubank, which came out of Brazil. You have many different companies here really that are growing and testing and innovating, but also really gaining scale and getting to the status of unicorns. We have in the case of startups, specifically in healthcare. When I talk about healthcare, even our clinical institutions or medical institutions are really creating their own spaces for innovation and having kind of startup incubators, accelerators of their own. You find that with Hospital Einstein in Brazil, which is one of the leading hospitals in the world, really. And you see that trend. And now in this region, technological adoption, the ability to innovate, the desire to innovate, all of it meeting together, because of course without the desire and kind of the will to do it, many countries might have all the resources to do it, but if you don't really have that passion and that ability to do it, you really find that in Latin America. People are willing to just go and test and try. And that happens, that has to do with the personality of the region, really. And it grows, it's differently manifested in different countries in the region also.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of innovation happening. People are willing and ready and eager to adopt new technologies.
Absolutely.
Making this sort of penetration of technology, the adoption of technology, relatively widespread. When you're talking about digital transformation, what are some of the areas that you see in the short term, right? As you rightly said, 10 years, is a very long lifespan. Let's say the next 3 years, what are some of the immediate areas that people want to focus on in terms of their digital transformation journeys? So if you were going to meet a company and say, look, let's make a 5-year plan. What are the first, what do you first focus on, first 2 years, and then what happens? What does that journey look like?
I mean, I think it depends on the maturity of the company, right? Some companies will already have relatively be on the higher end of a maturity curve in terms of being able to automate basic things, be able to have proper data, unified and cleansed, and there are many raw materials needed for digital transformation to happen. So, but what I do see is every company, regardless of maturity, has the same 2 elements that are critical. One is ensuring that the basics are leveled for digital transformation, which is, the data, ensuring that also you have basic things working, such as apps, websites, and the basic infrastructure you need for a website, proper architecture, technological architecture, landscape, and strategy to be able to have more flexibility to be able to operate. That's one part, which is let's say the most foundational elements. And then there's the other side of it, which has to do with keeping up with the world, keeping up specifically with customers. And that has to do with keeping up with innovation, embedding AI into the roadmap. Every company is figuring this out at the moment. And if they're not, I don't know if I've ever heard that. Yeah. I think AI would be definitely one of the elements on the innovation side, besides, of course, the foundational elements that I mentioned. Why is that now? Specifically, not just AI, but AI including generative AI. Because generative AI, it's essentially algorithms at the end of the day, right? But generative AI has done something that is different, which is it's actually democratized a very complex, niched, specialized field of AI, where originally AI was for coders, developers, people who are technologically fluent, and people who have some kind of training and very specialized skill set, to now generative AI, where it's democratizing it to anybody.
So the
Anybody.
access has changed.
The access has changed, and also the ability to adopt AI into
The
a day-to-day life
completely
changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Since you're on the topic of data, how important do you think, is data going to become the new oil? Are we going to really see data wars? Are we going to see companies that own most of, global data really become, they already are? Do we see them becoming more and more sort of the superpowers of the world because of data? Or do you think the data hype is just, it's a little bit of a farce and there really isn't so much of a war for data? Where are you on this war for data debate?
Now, this is completely my personal opinion. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All of this has been, by the way, but when I think about the data topic, really, to me, yes, there will be companies that will have access to a whole lot more data. They will, especially the biggest tech companies of the world today, right? You take Amazon's, Google's, etc. You take, you take any company really that is of scale today, it will have access to a lot of data. We, as a pharma company, also, for example, have access to a lot of data, including, data that needs to be treated extremely sensitively, right? So I believe that the responsibility for data from a regulatory standpoint will continue to be looked at more greatly, just as it is for AI at the moment. AI, essentially, what has happened is taken risk tiers to be able to evaluate the risk of the algorithms, and then consequently how much it needs to be regulated based on the risk of that it poses. But there's inherent uncertainty, just as with AI on data, because at the end, AI is based on data. Data itself is not a threat. What is a threat, really, and what can become a threat is the misuse of that power, which is, there has to be adequate consent. People have to know that their data transparency, I think, is paramount to avoiding data wars in the future.
Okay.
Because it won't be a war if people are consenting to it. It will be something that will be accepted. At the end of the day, if people are not consenting to it, then it needs to be respected. So I think it has more to do with how the data is governed than how it is. If it is used, in inadequate ways, I think that already is a question.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, so it's the governance of data, the safe use of data, responsible usage of data. If those factors are kept in mind, then data in itself cannot become a weapon. It's rather an effective tool for the future.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, great. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, work in terms of just the gig economy, flexible working, full-time working, offices, no offices, hybrid. All these terminology has come into play in the last 5 years or so. What is again going on in your region? What is the uptake of hybrid versus full-time versus flexible versus work from home? What is going on in Brazil, and where do you see that settling? Where do you see it settling in the next couple of years?
Yeah, specifically during the pandemic, first of all, everyone was 100% virtual.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Now, there was a lot of speculation at the time, where will we land post-pandemic? Will it be hybrid, etc.? Now, the reality of it is very interesting, because we actually see that there is an inclination towards companies actually wanting people to come in more often into the office. Some are going to extremes of actually saying you need to be there full time every day.
I love others are saying, now that's become an extreme. What used to be the status quo literally 4 years ago, now a lot of people say, hey, this is extreme. You want me to come every day to work?
Yeah. And you know what the beauty of it is? It is an extreme, and it was never seen as one before, and it was taking a toll on people. So, you actually start putting well-being into perspective on this, which was not really important part of the equation before the pandemic. And now you look at it and you actually see that the gap between that flexibility and not having it or not having it is actually the ability to take care of your well-being. And it's not working. It's just about having flexibility. Yeah. But what I do see, and what's very interesting, is that you have different people who have different preferences, of course. Some, of course, barring the people who don't have conditions at home to be able to work and actually prefer the office because that's where they have a safe space to be able to work. Yeah. And we have to be also very considerate of those types of scenarios, right? I think that when you talk about people's wishes, the people in Latin America in general, through companies that I've seen, through the conversations I've had across different industries and different communities, is that there is a general preference to have flexibility. Yeah. Okay. That flexibility varies. It could be 2 days a week, 3 days a week in the office, but people see value in connection. What I do feel has tangibly changed, and there's one very important element that has really, really changed, which is that people don't believe that you just go to the office to be there any longer. That argument doesn't really sit well or work with people anymore. You can't go into the office just to be there anymore. You need to go into the office for a purpose.
So it's less face time now. Okay.
Yes, but almost better to have meaningful moments in the office than just have people there just to have a coffee together.
Because where do you see this settling, right? What you're identifying is a trend we're seeing in many places, where the companies are now saying, please come back, we want to go back to 5-day weeks. And now people having, lived this sort of flexible lifestyle for the last 3 or 4 years, there's some resistance in the system. So there is a tug between employer and employee. We're seeing this sort of trend everywhere. So thank you for explaining it from your context as well. But where do you see this settling? Where do you think it's going to go in the next 3 years or 4 years? Where do you think the equilibrium will settle at?
Yeah, I believe the equilibrium will be a hybrid. It is essentially going to be where, there are some days of the week or some days based on the meaningful meeting concept of the in-person meaningful meeting will definitely strengthen over time, I believe. Okay. Because that's going to be the connective tissue between, that concept of how people should do things from a company perspective and how people actually want to do it.
Okay. So you think the concept of meaningful meeting is really what's going to drive, how often you're expected to come to work and sort of set management. Okay.
Absolutely. Because the consequences will be natural, right? You will see people wanting to leave the company if they feel that they're not being productive and not being fulfilled. And the downsides of it can be very drastic.
Okay. On your LinkedIn bio, you talk about diversity being the catalyst for innovation. It's very, very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about diversity. How much of a buzz is there around diversity, equity, inclusion in the region, at your organization, around you? And where do you see DEI being an influence of the future? Are you seeing this in hiring? Are you seeing this in education institutions? Are you seeing this in policy making, where they're saying women must have XYZ rights, etc.? Where are you seeing this DEI as an influence, and what areas can you identify in terms of an influence for the future?
Yeah, I think first of all, diversity and inclusion is today it's a concept that we still have to work on. And the goal, I think, of most companies, I think, that have the right intentions in place to truly do it, is that this not be a necessary conversation in the future, this be just a norm. It should, just as we talk about recruiting men and women, for some companies, that's the element of diversity that they're looking for, but still just to do that is still quite difficult. What's important is that we consider diversity for all of its facets. Yeah. And in Brazil and Latin America, that is definitely something that has been picking up a lot more. I would say I see a lot more discussion around it, specifically in corporate communities. Also, the true intention of the companies in general are to really, really increase diversity across the different facets, be it LGBTQIA, be it, just gender.
So how are you seeing this change the workforce? How are you seeing this influence policy making?
I mean, I can give you an example of my own team, and then I can give you an example of how I've seen it across a broader scale in a company. Yeah? In my team, for example, and although my current team is based in a different country, I mean, this was also true for my team past, which is you have to be intentional with recruitment. And I had to really, really work on ensuring that, specifically in the technological arena where there are fewer women than men, ensuring that I had people from different geographies represented, people from different language, native language speakers, included, people with diversity of thinking and experience included. In my team today, I have about 56% of my team female. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I came from a context where it was below 30.
Okay, now, but this drive was it an independent drive? Was it you coming in and saying, hey, I want to make this change? Or does it come from the top? Are you seeing like, there's all three pillars of society, right? Education, institutions, governance, and then corporations. So where is the push and pull effect, you're seeing in the region? Where is the top coming from?
There is a top-down agenda on expanding on diversity. But again, as leaders, you have to take the responsibility on yourself to make it happen. There can be a lot of guidance, and as companies are going forward, in fact, top-down leadership is really not really the way of the future either, right? People are definitely getting more empowered to take decisions and navigate, but I just feel that at the end, it's about responsibility and accountability for each leader to do it. Now, leaders have to be held accountable on this as well. So companies are working towards mechanisms where they can empower leaders to do it. They also encourage leaders to do it, but they also ensure that where it's not happening, that is something that is being looked at, discussed, and corrected. Because DE&I, it's not something that happens overnight or by magic or just by goodwill. It happens by intention. Okay. And in Brazil, that is something that is absolutely top of mind. It is, every company is really behind it. Bayer is really, really strong in this. We are, very resolute in being supportive of all communities, all people, for whatever their choices and decisions are personally, to be the most fulfilled selves that they can be. Okay, so you're seeing this as a top-down move. Yes. Yeah, and you're saying that, hopefully in the future, this conversation will become redundant. Absolutely. I mean, hopefully that's the goal. That's the aim. And it's also the role of the responsible leader. Since let's stay on leadership, since you broached that subject. How with all the digital transformation that you are working on and that you see around you, what happens to the role of the leader? How should leaders, how should managers change in this new world where you're co-botting rather than co-managing? What happens in this sort of new world where there's so much dependence on processes, automation, and technology? How should leaders now adapt for this new world that we're all going to be impacted? First of all, I think it's to self-educate and ensure that you have the right information in place. And if you don't know something, that you need to be the one to also find the right people and support to first level your knowledge on it. So what I find is that sometimes leaders will just dive into it, but not fully understand it, then expect the teams to just figure it out and on their own. And sometimes the teams feel like unsupported around this because it's a little bit of a challenging task. Digital transformation doesn't require extensive expertise. It does require extensive understanding in the applications of technology to meet the goals and needs across a value chain of whichever company and whichever area somebody might be working in. Now, how that can impact your area best is actually an advantage. So if someone takes the time, and if leaders take the time to understand and to level up knowledge on it, they have a better chance at actually adopting something and doing something meaningful with it. The worst scenario I think that leaders have faced is that there are a whole bunch of different initiatives, a plethora of experiments, and nothing really comes of it. It seems like it's just buzz or, just hype or just And then that actually takes a toll on the organization and on people to say this is just fluff, right? So for digital transformation to be meaningful also, leaders need to ensure that the bets are strategic. And strategy is about choice, right? So at the end, really choosing the right initiatives that can actually have an outcome, looking at outcome over output, right? It's very important to measure, to track, to be able to shut things down if they're not working with relative ease. Be able to not scale too fast if you're not sure, but also to scale where things might be difficult and you might have to reshuffle budgets. So there are decisions that need to be taken by leaders that have to come from a place of knowledge, have to come from a place of really taking and making good bets with strategic choices, and also being able to do this in a way where you pull people towards you and the mission, and this isn't something forced. So those are three elements I think that are critical for digital transformation and leadership.
Okay. So essentially, basically being privy to information. So you're making sort of an informed decision and making an informed choice, and obviously picking sort of agendas and missions that are sort of socially relevant and impactful. So leadership through the right sort of mandate and the right choices. I like that thought. But what do you do as a leader when the workforce changes? The workforce as we knew it 20 years ago is very different from the workforce of today, right? So first, let's talk about it. Are you seeing any changes? Are you seeing any change around you? Are you seeing younger people come into the workforce with a different expectation of what work is, what a workspace is, what work hours are like? Are you seeing any shifts in that space?
Yes, and I love young people, especially the ones I work with. I find that the way that they think and the way that they behave it's just so no nonsense. And the thing about being so resolute about knowing what they want in terms of specifically about what they don't want, right? They're very clear as to what they don't want. And so if when I was an analyst, if I was pushed long hours, that was just how it was. I just had to take it in as that's what it was.
Sure.
Right? Sleepless nights, all of that, it was just part of the job. It's part of your training. Everyone goes through it. Those types of arguments and that type of training doesn't necessarily work for the generations of today that are coming into the workforce. And why is that? It's because they are more concerned also about health and well-being. And that is a priority. And I see the positive side to it. And I believe that when they're committed to a mission, they are committed and they get it done and they want to make it happen. But their requisites are, the workforce is changing in that sense that people are not just taking things as a given anymore to do it because someone told them. And that is healthy to me. That's what I would want for my children. I find that to be very healthy, where they're able to choose their missions and actually commit to it and make it happen, right? On the other hand, there's also, because of technology, social media and so forth, there's also this sense of anxiety of things have to move faster than they can sometimes, of wanting to, escalate, wanting to advance career, faster than ever. And I think that these are some of the points that we have to manage and take more care of today in the workforce. But when it comes to digital transformation, I just believe that the younger generations already come in more prepared because they are naturally more exposed to it. So their ease and effortlessness to do very, very things that could take hours for somebody else, or even some millennials, is fascinating and is an asset, I think, in many ways to the workforce of the future. Yeah.
Okay. That's a very big positive that you identified. But I think the digital transformation, as you know it right now, is probably more complex because you're dealing with managers and leaders who haven't really been raised on this diet of technology and gadgets, but it'll obviously ease out in the next decade or so. Okay, since we're on the topic of tech and leaders, and last question on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about pharma and start winding down. New careers you see evolve. Are you seeing new sort of careers in technology, in digital transformation, leadership, management? Are you able to identify any sort of careers of the future?
Absolutely. So, even a decade ago, I don't think that we had such a focus on having developers and coders in pharma to the degree that we have today. You're looking at actually building technological products and actually product builders, and looking at, being able to have this in-house. Now, why is that? I mean, many companies are actually going towards embedding AI in every single area that they can, or AI expertise. The US government is doing it.
Mm.
Getting AI experts into different agencies. And why is that? Why is that happening? It's because there's a need to really be able to quickly level the knowledge, understanding of, like you mentioned, the groups of people who also have not been exposed to this more naturally, and to be able to have adequate representation there. So there are roles and jobs that are changing. Technical engineering skills are really, really crucial. They're extremely important for the present and for the future. Every company, regardless of industry, has got to get on board with having engineers and technical skills.
So that's a faction you definitely see. Product developers,
it's already
technical.
current. Yes, it's of today, and it'll only increase in the future because the demand for this specific type of skill is something that you'll see the need for.
Okay, so that's one area. So technology, product managers, product developers,
engineers.
Okay, that's one. Fine, great.
Yeah. Another area is also, I think, it has to do with, I mean, I really believe that when we talk about being able to have more generalist skill sets, people who are able to kind of work more fluidly across different aspects, is also very important. So I talked a little bit about skilled, kind of more specialized roles, but there's also this power in the generalist role. Now, why do I say that? Because as you go with fluid organizations, you go with gig marketplace, you go with talent pools that can, plugging talent in and out of different missions. As you go into a model of dynamic and shared ownership, as is the case of Bayer, you're looking for people to take on different roles in different areas in ways where they're not so set on job descriptions, job titles, what's written in the JD, what's written in, and really think beyond the bounds of a specific role description and title. Yeah. Now, the generalist is able to do that because in many ways, if you have different skill sets, if you're able to communicate, you're able to do strategy, you're able to be analytical, and you're able to also, for example, work on change leadership. You're a powerhouse for any transformation. Yeah. So this is you could be plugged into any different type of role or mission, and it doesn't niche you or your development.
Yeah. So you're saying the emergence of both. You're saying they'll both be required. You need the super specialized techie, and you still need the sort of generalist who has his or her hands in many different parts.
You will, but the people who are generalists who have more breadth of experience, I believe in the future will also have, there'll be a greater demand for that type of profile also. As we go into more fluid types of organizations where jobs and roles are not necessarily the definer of the defining factor of how people are allocated to work.
Okay, so you see more fluidity in terms of roles and areas, etc. Okay,
yeah, and
all right. Too, yeah. Okay. And anything else you want to talk about in terms of careers? Anything in the pharma industry? Anything in medicine, med tech? Anything you see evolving in those areas?
Specifically, I would say in pharma and medtech, we're really focusing a lot on this question of engineering skills, specifically in the technological arena. Engineering skills, being coders, developers. I think that kind of technical skill set is really something that we're focusing on quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay,
it's very important. Yeah,
very important. Okay, let's talk about the last section, which is skill building. So, yes. You're running a team, you're constantly looking at new employees and sort of seeing if they fit into your team. You work with a lot of young people as well. If you were to advise somebody who wanted to enter into your space, work in digitization, work in digital transformation, what are some of the skills you need to be an effective leader? And how would you advise someone in terms of skilling? What should they be really focused on?
So, every time I have to answer this question, people say, well, what types of skills should I get? I think that the first thing to answer to oneself
Mm.
is what am I truly interested in?
Mhm.
Now, I really
So
believe
we're
that,
assuming that someone wants to enter digital transformation. They want to work in
yes,
that space. So in your area, what are some of those skills you need to be future ready? How should they be skilling to enter your workspace?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, but what I mean is this is even for digital transformation, because at the end, you can know digital transformation is everything and it could be nothing depending on how you look at it. Yeah. So it's a very big world. So either if you're a more analytical person, you're more comfortable kind of working by yourself, you're more comfortable working on building a product, or being able to focus on numbers, or and be more analytical and more towards technology and coding, then I would say that the skill sets needed are to really coding, engineering, and kind of development skills, right? But depends on the profile of the person. That if those skills, I think at any rate would never hurt. So if you are maybe not so native or so naturally facile with these concepts, you still need to understand them sufficiently. So even for someone who's interested in coming into digital transformation to do digital transformation strategy, it would be important to also get their bearings on the technicals to some degree. You have to understand the basics. You have to understand, if someone talks about Python, you should know what it means. I think it's important to be able to know the basics and also be well informed. Yeah, might not be an expert in it, but you need to be at least relatively well informed in it. Another thing that's really important is skills of collaboration and communication. Digital transformation, in many ways, is about change leadership. It is about how a company can really be best positioned for the future, how it can compete best, how it can serve customers best. And for that, you really need to also be able to be a strong communicator, be able to connect pieces quickly and easily across different elements, be able to understand how business and technology connect, understand how better to strengthen it. So the skill sets there really also have to do with being able to process scenarios, find solutions, find gaps. It's very analytical, not just numerically, but also strategically. And that, I think, is a very powerful, that I've seen as one of the most powerful skill sets in the process of recruitment that I look for.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something that I look for very much when I recruit into my teams.
Okay, so as you're looking at these skills and you're looking at this workforce that's coming in, if you had to advocate changes in curriculum at some of these leading institutions, you've been a beneficiary of two very, very premium institutions. If you had to go back and say, hey, if you're going to train economists, here's what I would do in terms of curriculum, in terms of skilling, what would that be? And if you had to go back to the leadership development program you did and say, hey, great program, but now that I'm in the real world and as I'm planning my career for the future, here are things that I wish you have embedded in the curriculum. So I just want to try and get a pulse on, how should they have looked at leadership curriculum and how should they be looking at it going forward, and same for economics, because these are your two areas.
Yeah. I mean, specifically in economics, I don't believe that technology was really an aspect that was looked at all. It was very textbook.
Would you advocate for that? Would you say
I would not. I would not. I believe that, and I believe universities are today employing that a lot more. I think that gap is being met. Yeah, but at the time that I did, graduate from college, I do believe that was a big gap. It was something that was completely ignored because it was very textbook on micro and macroeconomics and industrial organization and so forth, but not really looking at the power of how technology could change the future, and how regulations could change, and how even the effects of supply and demand could change based on technological influences. Sure. So from an economics angle, I would say technology is something that should be a specific lens that is intentionally looked at for anyone in the future who's going to be an economics major, I think. And on the PLD side, I mean, I had the benefit of doing this in 2015, which, although is almost a decade ago, doesn't seem as long ago. The reason I say this is because we also at that time were, even with Sadal Neely talking about, global, how to manage global teams sitting in different countries, how to manage, and this was pre-pandemic, and you already had chance to really be exposed to those types of thinking and opportunities and how best to govern a new world, right? Besides that, we also talked a lot about disruption and disruptive innovation specifically, but also talking about how companies can position themselves to explore and exploit on opportunities. And I believe that technology was an angle that was really very much looked at through that lens of innovation. And so I do believe that was there. Yeah, I don't think I would change it. The only thing I would do is now, of course, incorporate the AI curriculum into that, because I think it's just something that's going to be non-negotiable for any leader in the future. There's no way leaders cannot know how to use ChatGPT or some kind of version of it internally in the company to be able to increase productivity for themselves and their teams. Generative AI is the basics, and AI is, I would say, a very reasonable arena for all leaders to at least have some level of knowledge around.
Okay, terrific. Okay, we'll end on that note. It looks like there's a lot of learning, unlearning, reskilling, more skilling coming up for all of us and for the coming generation, because you spoke about the rate of acceleration right at the start. So I feel like no matter what you get skilled in, very quickly you've got to keep upskilling. Looks like it's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. Absolutely. So look forward to all that learning and growth. And thank you for this conversation. Learned a lot from you. Thank you for sharing perspective on your region. Thank you for talking to us about digital transformation, leadership. I think we covered a nice gamut of topics, and your expertise absolutely shone through. So thank you for sharing, and I'm sure this conversation will benefit many, many people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vibha. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.